Okay, and this video is going to be on biomes, both terrestrial and aquatic biomes and ecosystems. We're going to look at how terrestrial biomes are defined, how aquatic ecosystems are defined, look at the categories of freshwater ecosystems, as well as the importance of estuaries. So one of the first things we look at when we look at a biome, as far as what kind of biome will be there, is the climate. And so we look at climate diagrams. And climate diagrams show us the average precipitation and average temperature by month. So you can see like this in July, you can see the temperature we read over here on the left, and that goes with the line, and the precipitation goes with the bar. So you can see the average temperature in July is around just under 30 degrees Celsius. So here's a map showing Earth terrestrial biomes, and it's divided a little bit differently than we're kind of typically used to. The typical biomes, there's 11 terrestrial biomes, major biomes that we talk about. We'll start at the equator and kind of move our way towards the poles. And so you can see in the tropical rainforest, the temperature doesn't change much throughout the year. It's pretty steady. And you can see on the climate graph that it rains all year long, but during the winter months is when we get the most rain. So it's warm and wet year-round. The soils are relatively thin and nutrient poor, which doesn't seem to make a lot of sense because of the diversity of plants there. But the plants are very specially adapted to that climate. Plants with large, heavy leaves and buttressed tree roots, because of the warm temperature year-round, the animals stay active year-round. The tropical dry forest has a dry season, basically. That's what the difference. Again, relatively warm, but during the winter and spring months, there's very little rainfall. And then end of spring, beginning of winter, or end of summer, beginning of winter, you get a lot of rain. You get the monsoons. So it has a rainy season. So warm year-round, alternating wet and dry seasons, but very rich soils. A lot of deciduous plants, which means that the trees lose their leaves in the fall. Waxy plant leaves to help plants conserve water during the dry season. During the dry season, the animals may estivate or kind of bury themselves in the mud and kind of go into it like a dormant state, or they may migrate out to somewhere where there's more water available. Tropical grasslands, savannas, scrublands. Again, pretty warm. It does have kind of a more wet and more dry season, but not quite as rainy as the tropical dry or the tropical rainforests. Warm seasonal rainfall, compact soil, frequent fires set by lightning that help with diversity by killing off the old growth, allows new plants to germinate. Plants with waxy leaves, again, deciduous trees, seasonal leaf loss. Many animals migrate from looking for water and food, or they're more dormant during the dry seasons. The desert, again, pretty warm still. There is precipitation, but, and again, it's the precipitation that defines a desert, not the temperature. You can have what we call hot and cold deserts, I guess is a good way to think about that. Low precipitation, variable temperatures, soils poor in organic materials, sandy soils are pretty common there. They typically, the warm deserts, the hot deserts, if you will, are typically on the leeward side of mountain ranges. Biotic, small plant leaves. The plants are adapted to conserve water, protect themselves from being eaten by things looking for water. The animals, a lot of them are nocturnal because it cools off at night quite a bit because the air is so dry. And they may not need to actually drink water. They may get enough water from their food to survive. The temperate grasslands include places like the plains in the United States. Go just a little bit west of here, Missouri, and then out to the Midwest there. Warm summers, cold winters, moderate precipitation. Again, not a lot, but again, you don't have warm and wet and dry seasons. You get a little bit of rain pretty much year round. Very fertile soils. And that's really important. The Midwest has kind of been the breadbasket to the world. A lot of food grown there. They do have occasional fires, usually set by lightning, which help, again, with diversity. Plants are resistant to grazing and fires. Lots of grazing animals are found here, like the butt bison here. Small animals use camouflage or burrowing as protection from predators. The temperate woodlands and shrublands, they have a very dry season where it hardly rains at all and is very warm. So there's a high threat of wildfire. There's a fire season, if you will. Again, abiotic factors: warm, dry summers, cool, moist winters, nutrient-poor soils, periodic fire, again, during those fire seasons. Plants are adapted to drought and fire. A lot of the animals that live there are browsers. The temperate forest is just a little bit east of us. Abiotic, cold winters, warm summers, year-round precipitation, fertile soil again. You can see that the precipitation is pretty constant throughout the year, but the temperature can vary quite a bit. Deciduous trees, again, lose their leaves. You have animals that hibernate or migrate in the winter to deal with the cold. Northwestern coniferous forests, mild temperatures with abundant precipitation in the fall, the winter, the spring. Not a lot in the summer, you can see on the graph. Cool, dry summers, relatively speaking. The soils tend to be more rocky, more acidic. Evergreens are the common plant, and they like acidic soil. Dense plant growth, tall trees. Many animals have varied diet, depending on what's available. The boreal forest or the taiga. Long, cold winters, mild summers, moderate precipitation. Again, acidic, nutrient-poor soil. Again, you can see not a ton of rainfall there. Dark green conifers are common here. Many animals have extra insulation to deal with the cold temperatures in the winter, or some of them will migrate to warmer areas during the winter. The tundra, very low precipitation, very few trees. It's mostly grasses and shrubs. Strong winds, low precipitation, short, soggy summers, long, cold, dark winters because they're pretty far from the equator. They tend to have long days during the summer, very short days during the winter. And they have a layer of permanently frozen soil called permafrost, where it doesn't ever thaw out. Biotic factors, small plants growing low to the ground. Many animals migrate in the winter or have heat-saving adaptations. And in the polar regions, mountain ranges, and polar ice caps, not easily defined by typical plant and animal communities. Polar bears, sometimes you find those there. Some other animals that live near there, like seals and things like that, but they migrate quite a bit. There's very little plant life there because it's mostly, frozen soil, lots of snow, glaciers, things like that. So aquatic ecosystems, there's a couple different kinds. There's things that affect them. How deep is the water? What is the water temperature? Are there currents? And what kind of nutrients are available? So marine, that's salt water. That's oceans, basically. We divide those into different regions based on depth. We have the photic and aphotic zones. Photic is the depth to which light can penetrate, and it can extend as far down as 200 meters. That's where photosynthesis can occur. That's where things at the bottom of the food chain typically are found. The aphotic zone, no sunlight penetrates down to that layer. So as you move from the shoreline out, you go through the intertidal zone, which is the area from the highest high tide to the lowest low tide, where animals have to be periodically exposed to air. You have the coastal ocean, which is the shallow ocean, which is where you'll find coral reefs and most of the life in the ocean. It's basically the area above the continental shelf. And then from the continental shelf, it drops off very deeply to the benthic zones at the very bottom of the ocean. Again, there are benthic zones technically up in the coastal and intertidal, but we start talking about the deep, deep ocean, the open ocean. You've still got the photic zone where you have some plankton and stuff growing there. Freshwater ecosystems, rivers and streams, lakes and ponds, freshwater wetlands. So rivers and streams and lakes and ponds, kind of the difference is the water flowing from one place to another or not? Rivers and streams, you have water flowing. How quickly it flows determines the kinds of life you find there. Lakes and ponds, basically those are non-flowing. Again, you have the size, the depth, kind of what determines whether it's a lake or a pond. Wetlands are really important. A wetland is an ecosystem in which water covers the soil or is present at or near the surface for at least part of the year. And there are three main kinds of freshwater wetlands. You got the bogs, where the soil is kind of moist all year long. You got a marsh, and you got the swamps. The swamps probably have the most water, and there's usually a very slow flowing current through the swamp. Whereas bogs and marshes, the water doesn't really move much. An estuary is a really important breeding ground for lots and lots of sea life. It's where a river and sea meet. And this is a mangrove swamp, which is a type of estuary that you would find like in Florida.